Have you ever wanted to play Pokémon Emerald, but with the art style of Crystal, along with new Pokémon typings, new evolutions, new gimmicks? Well, then Pokémon Emerald Seaglass is the game for you. Pokémon Emerald Seaglass is the latest fan-made ROM hack that is sweeping the Pokémon community. At its core, it is just Pokémon Emerald as far as the story and the region goes. However, in this iteration of it, you do play as Ethan and Lyra, who recently moved from Johto to Hoenn. From there, of course, you have to defeat Team Magma and Team Aqua as you become Pokémon Champion. But we already know all of that, so let's talk about what's different about Pokémon Emerald Seaglass. In this video, we're going to cover the game setup, the revamped map of Hoenn, the Pokémon, and the gimmicks. But before we get into this game, I'm going to take 1 second and say thank you to everyone who is a paid member quester, as well as everyone who is donating their time by subscribing to the channel and hitting that bell notification to watch all my videos and to participate in my weekly live streams where I am playing some of these fan games live for people to see. So you don't have to wait for these videos to get made. You can watch all the excitement live on my streams. Now, let's get into what is Pokémon Emerald Seaglass. So let's first dive in to the game setup of Pokémon Emerald Seaglass. The most important part about any Pokémon fan game that you play is knowing exactly how to start and how you should play the game. So Pokémon Emerald Seaglass is a ROM hack of Pokémon Emerald, which means you will need a Game Boy emulator as well as the ROM for it, which I can help you find in my Discord linked below. This game does offer a normal difficulty level as well as a more hardcore or more advanced difficulty level. Plus, you can add things in like level caps so that your Pokemon do not become overpowered. And you do get the EXP share pretty early on, and it is like the more modern EXP share where every Pokemon gains some EXP. So I left mine on normal mode, but I played with level caps so that my Pokemon did not become all powerful. As well as when you first start the game, you're gonna wanna explore your room, which might sound really weird for a Pokemon game, but trust me, it's gonna be completely worth it. Because if you go to your PC, there's not just the typical potion you can find, you will actually also find the Shiny Charm. That's right, Pokemon Emerald Seaglass gives you the Shiny Charm right away. And most of the time when you interact with the gaming device that is in your character's room, it just tells you what the gaming device is. However, in Pokémon Emerald Seaglass, that GameCube actually has a purpose. If you go to the Pokémon Emerald Seaglass website, you can find all the different cheat codes that you can enter into your GameCube device. These cheat codes range from things allowing you to have unlimited Master Balls, unlimited money, unlimited rare candies, as well as the ability to get the Gen 1 through 3 starter Pokemon, as well as some late generation Pokemon and some fun special Pokemon. Another fun thing is that some of those codes can help define how you play the game. So there is one code that is available for every single type of mono run you might want to do. And that essentially just allows the game to randomly send one of those types of Pokemon to your box for you to start your journey with. So that's pretty much all you need to know about the initial game setup. So right away, you need to know that you need to start exploring things because you never know what the developers might have hidden around each and every little corner. So now that your game is set up, let's talk about the revamped map of Hoenn. So in Pokémon Emerald Seaglass, it does take place in the Hoenn region. So the map is pretty much a one-to-one where whatever you find in the original Pokémon Emerald game, you're gonna find in Pokémon Emerald Seaglass. However, there are a few little differences to the landscapes. The biggest one that I noticed is that on the beaches throughout Hoenn, which there's a lot of them, there's a lot of water, you can actually catch wild Pokemon. And what's really cool about that is that they use the same mechanic as the desert biome does. So as you're walking along the beach, there are some patches of sand that are deeper than what your character normally walks on. When you walk into these deeper sand areas, you can find some unique Pokemon to those shorelines. What this does is essentially adds some necessity to all those little islands that you might find as you're surfing about the region, as well as when you go from the first town to the second town, you can find some really unique Pokemon, and I really like that because it just adds to the overall biodiversity, as well as the ability to find cool and unique Pokemon earlier in the game, just so that you don't have to only find them in rocks or in caves or in tall grass. Another really fun thing about the map is that you can actually go to Pacificlog Town after the second gym. There's this guy with a Pelipper who will take you, which you might think, why do I want to go to Pacificlog Town? What's really cool in Pacificlog Town that they added is the underwater Pokemon catching contest. This works pretty much the exact same way as the bug catching contest did in the Johto games, but the difference is that you can find lots of cool underwater Pokemon. The underwater area is biome specific, so you can go from cold areas to more tropical to your more typical kind of underwater Pokemon areas. It's really cool because, again, right away you can find a lot of really unique Pokemon to add to your team. And not only can you do the underwater Pokemon catching contest in Pacificlog, you can actually catch Pokemon in Pacificlog. There is a new little island area with lots of tall grass for you to catch some unique Pokemon to begin your journey with, as well as you can find all the Applin apples in Pacificlog Town. So if you used the cheat code to get an Applin right away, you can also stock up on whatever type of apple you might need to evolve your Applin. And I think just adding the ability to go Pacificlog Town much earlier is really, really cool because honestly, Pacificlog Town was a checkpoint in the original game. You used it as a way to heal your Pokemon between the final area of the map versus when you had to come back to do some of the more land-based missions or some of the extra kind of like fluff that Pokemon added in. So it's really, really cool to see the developers of Pokémon Emerald Seaglass gave Pacificlog Town a little bit more of a robustness to it, as opposed to just having it be a stop for you to heal your Pokemon. And speaking of new spots to find Pokemon, you can actually talk to this sailor who will give you different maps to go find different legendary Pokemon. And some of these areas might feel a little familiar to trainers because these are essentially the event Pokemon that they released during the Emerald run. So you can find really cool Pokemon like Deoxys, Mew, and then these awesome little post games of being able to find the legendary birds, the legendary beast, and a lot of other unique Pokemon from generations 1 through 3. And since we're on the topic of Pokemon, why not talk about the Pokemon that you can find in Pokémon Emerald Seaglass? So again, the developers of Pokémon Emerald Seaglass did a fantastic job with adding in and deciding what Pokemon to add into their game. You can get Pokemon from generations 1 through 3, which is very typical for these types of ROM hacks because adding in future Pokemon or Pokemon we find later in the games is kind of difficult, especially when you want to match the styles and things like that. But they did go above and beyond and actually allow for new pre-evolutions as well as new post-evolutions to be in the game. So if you find yourself a Mankey, you can definitely get an Annihilate. If you find yourself a Girafarig, you can get that for Farigiraf. And the same thing applies to Pokemon that were added pre-evolutions and new evolutions in the previous gens, such as Pokemon from Generation 4 and Pokemon from Generation 8. And another really cool specific thing is that they specifically added in some Generation 8 and 9 Pokemon that you normally cannot find in Kanto, Johto, or Hoenn. They did a really cool thing where there's a trainer on the shoreline that you can actually get a Tinkaton egg so that you can have the very, very popular Steel Fairy type Pokemon with that massive hammer. As well as in your hometown, you can actually, once you get cut, get Applins if you don't want to do the whole using the cheat code method. You can actually find them in this little hidden patch of grass right at the edge of your hometown. And as I mentioned, if you go to Pacificlog Town, you can then find all the different apples you're going to need to evolve your Applin into all the different evolutions of Applin. Another really cool thing that they did with Pokemon Emerald Seaglass was they gave Pokemon some new typings. So there are some where they just took inspiration from the Mega Evolutions. So for example, Sceptile is a Grass Dragon type, and Altaria is a Dragon Fairy type, which I think is really, really cool that they were able to take those inspirations and add them in at the base level because there are no Mega Pokemon in this game. They even gave new typings to familiar Pokemon. So Dodrio is now a ground flying type, which I think is super unique for a ground dwelling bird. Vulpix is a fire fairy type, which again is really, really unique because it does have this mystical kind of fairy aspect to it. The Electivire line got a fighting type added to it once it fully evolves, and Magmortar got a dark type added once it fully evolves, as well as some honestly fan favorites in my opinion is the Octillery that is a water fire type, and the Sunflora that is a grass fire type. I think the fact that they went in and added in some new typings and changed up how some Pokemon work was just an an extra addition to the game that really a lot of people can enjoy. And don't worry, you can find every single evolution item in this game, regardless of if it's a Pokemon that evolves through a trade evolution, evolves through an item, even Pokemon like Ursaluna and Stantler and Kleavor that have Gen 8 mechanics of, oh, you need these specific items only found in Hisui. You can actually find them throughout this variation of Hoenn, so you can have all the different Pokemon combinations you could possibly think of. The cool thing too is that you don't have to worry about trading them. You simply find things like the link cable or the metal coat and you just give it to the Pokemon. They just act as items like stones. Oh, and did I mention your Pokemon can walk behind you? There's tons of cool little gimmicks in this game that definitely hints at other Pokemon games. So let's now talk about all the different gimmicks in Pokemon Emerald Seaglass. So a really cool nod to Generation 8 was that they added Wishing Star pieces. And no, you cannot make your Pokemon supersized in Pokemon Emerald Seaglass. Instead, these Wishing Star pieces are used at a wishing well in Rustboro that work very similar to the Dynamax dens, where a random Pokemon will come out of it. But a little bit differently, you throw in a Wishing Star piece and you get a base level Pokemon just added to your party or added to your PC box. You get to nickname them. They're all just kind of randomly generized. So like I found like a Phanpy, I found an Azurill, I found like Pidgeys and Spearows and things like that. So it's just a really good way to be able to like get a lot of base level Pokemon without having to just run around the grass constantly. And speaking of other generational gimmicks, we do have Z moves added into Pokemon Emerald Seaglass. That is the one big gimmick that they did add that a lot of other fan games, typically add things like Mega Evolutions, some add Dynamaxing. But Pokemon Emerald Seaglass decided to add this Alolan feature of Z moves. So Z moves, I know, were not everyone's cup of tea. It's one of those things of, I think in the generation that they were introduced, they were really, really cool to have in Alola, but at the same time, the 3D sprites doing it all just kind of, it looked a little silly when they just kind of bounced around or hopping and just kind of like moving on a flat plane. But in Pokemon Emerald Seaglass, because it is in the style of Crystal, the Z moves honestly look better than ever. And the fact that you can add them to any Pokemon that you have obviously the move that correlates to the Z Crystal for, it really gives you another edge to the game. It's not one of those things where every single Pokemon trainer, once you unlock the ability to have Z moves, starts using Z moves. It's just something fun for the player. I honestly couldn't even find the Z Crystals because I thought they were part of the overall story, when in reality, you just gotta go back to the corporation where you get all the stuff from the president, and there's a guy in there that just sells them to you. So they're just an additional fun mechanic that the player can use in the game. And then speaking of things you get from that corporate building in Rustboro, you do have the Pokénav in this version of Pokemon Emerald Seaglass. It's really, really cool because you can actually use it to like specifically hunt out Pokemon. I can't quite remember if that's how it worked in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but it was really, really cool in this game to be able to like have that feature brought back to, I would say, its base game. It wasn't a remake where they first introduced it to my knowledge, but it's cool to be able to see it added back into this fan game where, yeah, you can open the Pokénav screen and you can be able to find Pokemon that you have already encountered but maybe haven't caught yet, as well as it tells you your catch chain. So I think that also plays into shiny catching, which is pretty cool. So they kind of have a built-in shiny hunting tool for people to use. And I already kind of mentioned this, but the underwater Pokemon catching contest was super, super cool in Pacifilog. It, again, works in a very similar way to the bug catching contest where you have a first place, a second place, and a third place. So you each get some kind of little reward, but for the first time you do it, you do get the HM waterfall, which if you did what I did and went to Pacifilog Town before you actually got all of the gyms that you could use waterfall, I couldn't scale any waterfalls early, but I did get a really, really powerful water type move after the second gym. So that was a really cool addition to add so that my team could become stronger if I found a water type that needed an extra edge. And then another really cool gimmick that was in the game is that they brought back the game corner, but in a really fun, unique way. Because at this game corner, they have a lot of different pinball machines. That's right, they brought in Pokemon Pinball to Pokemon Emerald Seaglass. And it's a really cool mechanic because it works almost the exact same way as the traditional Pokemon pinball game. You just have to hit one button to activate both triggers at the same time, and your ball is a Pokeball, so you have to hit the different Pokemon in order to catch them or to advance in the level systems so that you can earn prizes. And what's really cool is that for every one pinball point you get after successfully completing a pinball game, you can then trade that into the game corner counter and get a random item. So you can get things like Sacred Ash, you can get Z moves, you can get linking cables and other evolutionary items. It's just a really cool and fun way to kind of see what random items you can get dished out to you. You get to play this game and it's really fun. I had a blast. During my streams, I literally could have just played Pokemon Pinball the entire time. Overall, Pokemon Emerald Seaglass was a fantastic game to play. It's one of those things of, it's very familiar because it is just the basic story of Pokemon Emerald, but with a lot of little kind of changes and stuff that keep you on your toes still, like the change in evolutionary types, the change in items, the change in Pokemon typings and things like that. It's really cool because like this affects gym leaders and things like that as well. So they're not just, oh, the same gym leaders you fought since 2004 or whenever Pokemon Emerald was first released. It's one of those things that they all did get a revamp. The whole game does have a nice fresh coat of paint with the art style of Pokemon Crystal. It was a blast. I know I had a ton of fun playing it on stream, and everyone in the comments was definitely eager to play this game. I think I would best sum this up as, if you are a longtime Pokemon fan and you want to get back into the game, or you're not a big fan of where Pokemon has gone since it switched over to the 3D sprites and kind of the 3D gameplay, then this is a great game for those people that want a more traditional Pokemon experience, but yet still have something that feels new, because it's this whole new kind of experience with a classic model. As always, I want to thank the member questers as well as those that are subscribed to the channel. If you are not yet subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell notification so you can see when I'm not only releasing a new video, but playing another fan game live on my streams, so that you don't have to wait for these videos to be done. You can see all the little ins and outs of the next fan game I'm reviewing live on my streams. That's all for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section about Pokemon Emerald Seaglass. Again, join the Discord channel for any assistance to try and find this ROM hack or any other ROMs and emulators. I hope to see y'all in the next video, and until next time, happy questing, y'all.